Have you ever been in a situation where speaking up for what's right might cost you everything? Imagine this: a quiet fourth-grade classroom. A young girl staring down at her standardized test, realizing something is off. Really off. She knows that pointing it out could disrupt the entire testing process, but the thought of letting a mistake slide doesn't sit right with her. Little does she know that her choice to stand up will spark a chain of events that leaves an entire school system questioning their practices. Before we dive in, if you believe that every voice deserves to be heard, be sure to like this video and subscribe to support more stories like this. Trust me, you'll want to see how this brave girl's actions shook the system to its core. The clock ticked steadily as Sophia Ramirez, a sharp 10-year-old, turned each page of the test with a focused determination. She had always been the kind of student who loved learning, curious, thoughtful, and ready to tackle any challenge. But today was different. She squinted at a science question about the solar system, her mind whirring. "Wait," she murmured to herself, tilting her head in confusion. This question didn't make sense. The answer choices didn't align with what she had learned in class. Sophia's mind raced as she thought about the implications. If this question was wrong, what if there were other mistakes too? Sophia hesitated, her hand hovering in the air. She'd always been told to speak up if something didn't feel right. So gathering her courage, she raised her hand and whispered to her teacher, "Mrs. Thompson, could you check this question? I think there's an error." The teacher, clearly uncomfortable, frowned. "Sophia, just pick the best answer," she replied, her tone tense. But Sophia couldn't let it go. She looked around and saw that some of her classmates were noticing her concern. "But, Mrs. Thompson," she whispered, "if there's one mistake, there could be more. This isn't fair." A ripple of whispers spread through the room as her classmates began to inspect their own test booklets, curious if they, too, would spot any errors. Mrs. Thompson, visibly annoyed, clapped her hands sharply. "Everyone, focus on your own work," she snapped. "Sophia, if you can't settle down, I'll have to send you to the principal." Sophia's heart pounded. She knew she could either stay silent or risk getting into trouble by standing up for what she believed was right. Taking a deep breath, she responded, "I can't take a test that's unfair. This isn't just about me. It's about all of us." What happened next shocked everyone. Mrs. Thompson escorted Sophia to the principal's office, the sound of her classmates' shocked murmurs following her down the hall. When they arrived, Principal Johnson looked at her sternly. "Sophia, you caused a major disruption during an important test," he said. "We cannot tolerate this kind of behavior. I'm afraid we'll have to suspend you for the rest of the week." Sophia felt a wave of disbelief wash over her. Suspended? For asking questions. She wanted to cry but held her head high. She thought about her parents and how they had taught her to stand up for herself, no matter the consequences. She didn't regret speaking up, but the thought of disappointing them stung. An hour later, Sophia's parents, Elena and Miguel Ramirez, rushed into the school office. They were confused and concerned, unsure of what had happened. "What's going on?" Elena asked, her voice tinged with worry. Principal Johnson explained the situation, emphasizing that Sophia's actions had disrupted a standardized test. Sophia's parents looked at each other, shocked. Miguel turned to the principal. "So let me get this straight. Our daughter pointed out a mistake, and instead of checking the test, You suspended her? Principal Johnson frowned, clearly not used to being questioned. The test is a statewide assessment. It's been thoroughly reviewed. This was just a minor error. Elena folded her arms. If it's just a minor error, then why is our daughter being punished so severely for bringing it to your attention? But the principal stood firm, and the family left the office that day feeling both defeated and determined. They knew one thing: they weren't going to let this slide. That night, over dinner, Sophia's parents reassured her that she had done the right thing. They were proud of her courage, and they told her that sometimes standing up for what's right would have consequences. But that didn't make it any less important. Inspired by her parents' support, Sophia's mind began to churn with ideas. She couldn't just let this go. She'd seen the look on her classmates' faces. Many of them were wondering if they could trust their education system. She wasn't alone in this. That night, the Ramirez family made a plan. The next day, Elena and Miguel began reaching out to other parents in the community. They shared Sophia's story with a lawyer friend, Sarah, who agreed to help them. By Friday, word had spread. Parents, teachers, and even local reporters were calling the Ramirez home, eager to learn more about the brave fourth grader who had dared to challenge the system. On Monday morning, Sophia returned to school with her parents and their lawyer, Sarah. They walked through the school hallways with determination, feeling the eyes of students and teachers on them. The tension was palpable. In the principal's office, Sarah laid out their case. By suspending Sophia, you not only discouraged her from speaking up, but you also raised questions about the test's integrity. This isn't just about one student. It's about accountability. We're asking that Sophia be reinstated, that her record be cleared, and that the test be reviewed independently. Principal Johnson's face turned pale as he realized the seriousness of their argument. He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the mounting pressure. After a tense discussion, he finally agreed to reinstate Sophia and initiate a review of the test, though he refused to remove the suspension from her record entirely. When they left the office, Sophia was greeted with cheers from her classmates. She was overwhelmed by the support and a newfound sense of pride. It felt strange to be the center of attention, but for the first time she felt her voice had made a real difference. Over the next few weeks, Sophia returned to her routine, but things weren't quite the same. She noticed that students would look at her with admiration, and some even approached her to thank her for standing up. However, not everyone was supportive. She overheard a group of fifth graders whispering, "She just wanted attention. Now, we might have to take the test all over again." Sophia felt a pang of guilt. Had she made things worse for her classmates? That night, she tearfully confided in her parents. "Maybe I should have just stayed quiet," she whispered. But her father put his arm around her and said, "Sophia, speaking up takes courage. Look at the impact you've made. People are talking about how to make tests fairer, and that's all because of you." Hearing that, Sophia found a new purpose. She started working with her teacher to create a student representative committee where kids could share concerns about their school experience. Their first project was a suggestion box for ideas on how to improve the school, from adding healthier cafeteria food to updating the playground. To her surprise, Principal Johnson agreed to meet with the committee once a month to discuss their ideas. It seemed Sophia's actions had sparked a small revolution, not only in her school but across the district. The State Education Board began to take notice as well, ordering a full review of the test after discovering several more errors in other questions. Soon, News of Sophia's efforts spread. Schools across the state started considering new ways to assess students, including more project-based assessments and reducing the emphasis on high-stakes exams. Sophia's suggestion box idea was adopted by several other schools, encouraging students to speak up and share their ideas. As winter turned into spring, the impact of Sophia's actions continued to ripple through her school and beyond. More schools began adopting her idea of a suggestion box, and her school's administration made a noticeable shift toward encouraging students to speak up and share their thoughts. It was as if her small act of courage had opened a door for students everywhere to finally have a say in their own education. Then one day, Sophia was called into the school auditorium for what she thought was a routine assembly. She took a seat among her classmates, who whispered excitedly, wondering what was happening. The air was charged with anticipation. Sophia spotted her parents sitting near the front row, which only made her more curious. After a few moments, the principal took to the stage, followed by a well-dressed woman carrying a small stack of papers. Sophia didn't recognize her, but the woman's confident stance made it clear that she was someone important. The murmurs in the auditorium grew louder as the principal introduced her. "Good morning, students and teachers," Principal Johnson began, looking unusually nervous. "Today we have a special guest from the governor's office, Ms. Linda Martinez, who has an exciting announcement to share with us." Sophia's eyes widened. The governor's office? She glanced at her parents, who were beaming with pride. Ms. Martinez approached the microphone and began to speak. "Thank you, Principal Johnson, and thank you to all the students and teachers here today. I'm honored to be here on behalf of the governor. We're here to recognize the courage of a remarkable student, someone who saw something wrong and wasn't afraid to speak up, even when it was difficult." Sophia felt her cheeks flush as Ms. Martinez continued. "Because of her bravery, the state is taking a closer look at the way we assess students. Today, I am thrilled to announce the passage of a new education bill inspired by her actions. This bill, named the Student Voice Act, guarantees students the right to question and provide feedback on their educational experience without fear of punishment." The crowd erupted in applause. Sophia's classmates cheered and clapped, some even calling her name. She felt a swell of pride mixed with a sense of disbelief. This was all happening because of a single question she had asked in her classroom months ago. Ms. Martinez smiled and gestured toward Sophia. "Please join me in recognizing Sophia Ramirez, the inspiration behind the Student Voice Act." Sophia stood up, her heart pounding, and made her way to the stage, where she shook hands with Ms. Martinez. She turned to face the crowd, feeling the weight of what this moment represented. She had done something important, not just for herself, but for students everywhere. In the days that followed, Sophia became somewhat of a local celebrity. News outlets picked up her story, and she was even invited to speak at a few local schools about the importance of using one's voice. At first, she felt nervous about all the attention, but her parents reminded her that this was an opportunity to inspire others. One weekend, she was invited to a nearby high school to give a short speech at their assembly. As she stood in front of hundreds of older students, she took a deep breath, recalling the journey that had brought her here. "When I first spoke up about that test," she began, "I never imagined it would lead to anything like this. I was just trying to make sure we were being treated fairly. But I learned something important, that even small voices can make a big impact. If you see something wrong, don't be afraid to speak up. You might be surprised by the difference you can make." The audience applauded, and Sophia felt a wave of pride and fulfillment wash over her. She realized that standing up for herself had taught her one of life's most valuable lessons. Change often begins with a single, courageous voice. Back at her own school, Sophia's suggestion box initiative continued to thrive. Students submitted ideas every week, and the monthly meetings with Principal Johnson turned into meaningful discussions. The principal, once skeptical, now seemed to genuinely listen to their concerns. Sophia felt a sense of accomplishment seeing the positive changes she had helped inspire. However, the journey wasn't without its challenges. Some students, especially older ones, didn't take the suggestion box seriously. She often heard comments like, "Why bother? Nothing's going to change anyway." But Sophia remained patient and determined, taking time to explain how even small ideas could add up to big changes. One day, a fourth grader approached her nervously in the hallway. "Sophia," he said, shifting his weight from foot to foot, "I put a suggestion in the box, but I don't know if it's important enough." Sophia smiled and encouraged him. "Every idea matters. You never know who it might help." The boy looked reassured and thanked her before hurrying off to class. Sophia felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her actions had sparked something meaningful, not just in the school administration, but in the students themselves. Meanwhile, the independent review of the SCAP test continued, and it revealed something shocking. Not only had there been errors in the test Sophia pointed out, but there were several other mistakes in other sections. The testing company responsible was forced to admit that the review process had been rushed, leading to a lack of quality control. The State Board of Education decided to discard the test results and reevaluate how standardized tests were handled statewide. This news spread quickly, and Sophia's school became a focal point in the discussion about educational reform. Parents, teachers, and students across the state were now questioning whether high-stakes standardized tests were the best way to assess learning. It felt surreal to Sophia, knowing that her voice had contributed to such a massive change. As the school year drew to a close, Sophia was asked to speak at the final assembly. Standing at the podium in front of her entire school, she reflected on the past few months. "When I spoke up that day, I was just trying to fix what I thought was a mistake. I didn't know it would lead to something bigger. But I've learned that standing up for what's right is worth it, even when it's hard. I hope each of you will remember that your voice matters too. Don't be afraid to use it." The audience erupted in applause. Teachers, students, and even Principal Johnson stood and clapped, acknowledging her courage and determination. The changes didn't stop there. Over the summer, the State Board of Education began implementing new assessment strategies. Many schools adopted project-based evaluations and other forms of student-centered assessments, reducing the focus on standardized tests. Sophia's story was featured in educational publications, and her idea of a student suggestion box became a model that other schools across the country began to adopt. Back at home, Sophia's parents were immensely proud of her. Elena hugged her tightly one evening, saying, "Sophia, you've shown everyone that one person really can make a difference. We're so proud of you." As for Sophia, she felt grateful for the support of her family, friends, and even the teachers who had once doubted her. She knew that her journey was just beginning, and she was ready to continue making a difference, one step at a time. As the story of Sophia's bravery continued to inspire others, people began sharing their own experiences of speaking up for what they believed in. Sophia's journey became a beacon of hope for young students everywhere, proving that age is just a number when it comes to making an impact. So, what do you think? Do you believe that students should have a voice in their education? If you think so, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this story with others who might need a little inspiration today. And remember, no matter how small your voice might feel, it has the power to make waves.